We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 12a. This Amud is sponsored by Alexander Rosenfeld in memory of Blima Gittel, Basar of Shmuel Levi Steinmetz. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you'd like to sponsor an Amud or a Daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah began discussing the laws of Pigul when it comes to Karban Mincha. When the Kohen takes the kometz, if he has in mind, if he has intention to consume the carbon, that could be either the consumption of the Mizbeach, of the carbon, or the consumption by people. If he has in mind that it's going to be outside of the proper place, so then the carbon is in fact disqualified, but there's no chi of kares, there's no liability to kares in that situation if one would partake of the carbon. But if the intention is outside, that the carbon will be consumed outside of the proper time, so then the Mishnah continues pigul, that's considered pigul, v'chayavin olav kares, and there would be liability to kares. And Rashi explains pigul v'chayavim olav kares ha'ochel mishiar mincha, meaning if somebody were to eat from the remainder of that carbon mincha, which has now been rendered pigul because of that intention of the wrong time, outside the proper time, so one who eats is going to be chayiv kares, tichsiv b'chutz lizmanu, because it's written by outside of the proper time, avon notisa, it says one will carry the sin, uchsiv b'nosar, it's also written by nosar, v'ochlav avon yisa, similar language, malahalam ksiv v'nichrusa, just like over there, kares, afkan ha'ochla b'kares, so it's over here, somebody who eats it gets kares, v'hach gezer shava b'perakam v'dekrisus. This gezer shav is found in the first parak of Krisus. And the Mishnah continues, Zeh haklal, this is the rule, kol hakometz onosin bekli hamolech hamaktir lechol davar shedarko lechol lahaktir davar shedarko lahaktir. Anybody who does the kmitz, again takes the fistful or places it in the vessel or walks it over to the mizbeach or burns it in order to eat something which is normally eaten or to burn something which is normally burned. Chutz lemakomo, if the intention is to do that outside of the proper place, so pasul, again it's disqualified, vein bo kares, but there is no kares. Chutz lizmanu, but if the intention is outside of the proper time, pigul v'chayav and all of kares, then it's considered pigul, and there is a liability to kares. And Rashi explains, Kol ha-kometz o nosin, kometz o molech o maktir. Again, kometz is taking the fistful, molech is conveying it to the mizbeach, maktir, burning it on the mizbeach, al-manas lechol davar shedarko lechol, with the intention of eating something that is eaten of the carbon, kagon shirayim, like the remainder of a carbon mincha, o lahaktir davar shedarko lahaktir, or to burn what the part of the carbon that's supposed to be burned, kagon kometz, for example, the kometz is burned on the mizbeach, chutz lizmanu, if the intention is to do that outside of the proper time, then it's pigul. But let's say, for example, he had intention to burn the remainder the next day. Shirayim are generally not burned, they're eaten. Or to eat the kometz the next day. Again, the kometz is usually burned on the mizbech, it's not eaten. Kosher, then it's kosher. The badla daito etzel kol adam, that kind of intention is essentially considered to be nullified. And Rashi continues, Bedalet avodos halal mefaglin b'mincha. It's in these four avodos that we say there's a concept of pigul when it comes to a karban mincha. Again, that refers to the kometz, taking the kmitza, molech, maktir. In all of those, you have pigul by karban mincha, degamrin and mizvachim. We learn out from animal karbonos, slaughter karbonos behekesha, through a hekesh, kedamar b'reish pirkin, like we say in the beginning of our perek, the izkish mincha lechatas. There's a comparison of mincha to chatas, umahi hekesha, gamrin and machshava to poselos b'mincha, umina mazevach nifko b'dalet avodos. We learn from there, just like the zevach is pigul through four avodos, which are shchita v'kabola holacho zrika. That's the slaughtering, the receiving of the blood, the conveying of the blood, and the throwing of the blood. Kedamrinan b'toras kohanim, like we say in Toras Kohanim, af mincha b'dalet avodos. So too, when it comes to karban mincha, there are four avodos as well. Kemitza keneged shchita, the taking of the fistful, that corresponds to the shchita. Kabola keneged matan kli, and kabola corresponds to placing it in the vessel. V'holacha keneged holacha, conveying is like conveying. V'haktara keneged zrika, and haktara, which is burning, that corresponds to zrika, the throwing of the blood. And the Mishnah continues and says, Uvilvad sheyakriv hamatar k'mitzvah. So all of this is true as long as the matter, the permitted, is brought in accordance with its mitzvah, meaning it's brought properly. Ketzad karev hamatar k'mitzvah. So what do we mean when we say that the matter is brought properly? That would be the following. For example, kamatz b'shtika. Let's say the kmitza was taken in silence. There was no wrong intention there. Nasan b'kli v'holech v'hikder chutz lizmano. He placed it in the vessel. He conveys it. He burns it with intention outside the proper time. Osha kamatz chutz lizmano. Or let's let's say he takes the kmitza with intention outside the proper time, and Nasan Bekli V'Holech V'Hikter B'Shtika, he places it in the vessel, he conveys it, he burns it in silence, there's no improper intention there. Osha Kamatz V'Nasan Bekli, or he does the kmitza and places it in the vessel, V'Holech V'Hikter, and he conveys it and burns it Chutz Lizmano outside the proper time. In all of these scenarios, Zeu Shakar of Hamater K'mitzvaso. These are all examples where the matter is done properly, meaning the only thing that's done wrong is the intention Chutz Lizmano. Ketzad Lokar of Hamater K'mitzvaso. What's an example where the matter is not done in the proper fashion? That would be as follows. Kamatz Chutz L'Mekomo. For example, he takes the kmitza, the festival, and there he has intention outside the proper place, and then Nasan Bekli V'Holech V'Hikter Chutz Lizmano, then he places it in the vessel, conveys it, he burns it with intention outside the proper time. There's another disqualifying intention of outside the proper place. O Shekamatz Chutz Lizmano, or let's say he takes the kmitza with intention outside the proper time. Nasan Bekli V'Holech V'Hikter Chutz L'Mekomo, he places it in the vessel, he conveys it, he burns it outside the proper place with that kind of intention. O Shekamatz V'Nasan Bekli V'Holech V'Hikter Chutz L'Mekomo, or he does the kmitza, places it in the vessel, conveys it, burns it Chutz L'Mekomo. Zeu Shelo Karav HaMater K'mitzvaso. In all of these cases, the matter was not done k'mitzvaso as its mitzvah, and therefore we're not going to say it has the laws of pigul. Rashi explains, "Uvilvad she'ekarav hamater k'mitzvaso ki'ilu haya kosher shelo yehe shum psul ela pigul." The point is, everything has to be done kosher, and there should be no other disqualification except for the pigul disqualification. That's the outside the proper time disqualification, that intention. Avalim yesh shum psul acher sulo pigul. But if there's some other disqualification, so then it's not pigul ve'ein bo kares, and that will take away the kares. Kedamar beperak beis, like we say in the second parak later on, yerotza ksiv pigul ksiv bekosher, yerotza kartzos kosher kach kartzos pigul. Everything has to be done by pigul. Everything else has to be done properly. Shelo yehebo shum psul acher. There should be no other psul acher. B'shtika means shalochish if he didn't have that wrong intention. O shakamatz v'nasan bekli v'holech v'hiktir. It means kol eila chutz lizmano. All of these with the intention outside the proper time. Zeu shakarev hamater k'mitzvaso. That's called the matter being offered k'mitzvaso. The lo hayabo shum psul acher. The point is there's no other disqualification. O shakamatz v'nasan bekli v'holech v'hiktir kol eila chutz l'mekomo. If he does all of these things with intention outside the proper place, kilomar o katani means say, or imasa achas me'el, if any one of these are done, al menas lechol shirayim chutz l'mekomo, with the understanding, with the intention to eat the remainder outside the proper place, v'chol hagimel chutz l'zmano, the other three with intention outside the proper time, then lo karav hakometz k'mitzvaso. That is not called offering the kometz k'mitzvaso. And the Mishnah continues, Minchas Chote or Minchas Kenos, when it comes to the Mincha of the sinner, or the Minchas Kenos, which is the Mincha of the Sota. So there's another disqualification that can mean it was Lo Karav Hamater K'mitzvaso, because there's Shelo Lishma, if it's not done for its sake, that's a disqualification. And so the Mishnah explains, Shekamsin Shelo Lishman, let's say, for example, the Kmitza, the festival, is taken not for their sake, and then Nosan B'kli V'holech V'ikter Chutz Lizmano, he places it in the vessel, he conveys it, he burns it with intention outside the proper time. O Shekamatz Chutz Lizmano, let's say, he takes the kmitza with intention outside the proper time, Nasan Bekli V'holech V'ikter Shelo Lishman, and then he places it in the vessel, conveys it, burns it with Shelo Lishman, with intention not for its sake. O Shekamatz V'nasan Bekli V'holech V'ikter Shelo Lishman, he takes the kmitza, places it in the vessel, conveys it, burns it Shelo Lishman, again, Zeu Shelo Karav Hamater K'mitzvaso. These would be examples of Lo Karav Hamater K'mitzvaso. Lechol Kezayis Bachutz Kezayis L'mocher, let's say he has intention to eat a Kezayis outside the proper place and a Kezayis tomorrow. Kezayis L'mocher, Kezayis Bachutz, his intention for one Kezayis tomorrow, one Kezayis outside the proper place. In that order, Kechatzi Zayis Bachutz, Kechatzi Zayis L'mocher, a half Zayis outside the proper place, a half Zayis tomorrow, Kechatzi Zayis L'mocher, Kechatzi Zayis Bachutz, or first he has the intention, a half Zayis tomorrow, and then a half Zayis outside the proper place. In all of these cases, Puzzle, again, it's disqualified, Ve'in Bo Karis, there's no Karis, because there's that additional intention of outside of the proper place. However, the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Yehuda says, Zeh HaKlal, this is the rule, in Machsheves Hazman Kidmo LeMachsheves HaMakom, if the intention, the wrong intention in terms of time, preceded the wrong intention in terms of place, so then actually pigul, it is pigul. V'chayav all of Karis, and there is liability to Karis, in Machsheves HaMakom Kidmo LeMachsheves Hazman, but if the wrong intention in terms of place, if that preceded the wrong intention in terms of time, so then possible it's disqualified. However, Vein Bo Kares, there is no Kares. The Chachamim say, no, it doesn't matter the order in terms of that. Zev is that possible Vein Bo Kares. In both situations, it is disqualified and there is no Kares. And Rashi explains, Minchas Chota Yukanos, again the mincha of the sinner, and the Minchas Kanos, which is the carbon mincha of the Sota, Yeshba and Od Psalacher, there's another disqualification, Hamotzian Midei Pigel, which would take away from it being Pigel, Kagon Shalol Lishmanu. For example, again, you have the disqualification that it's not for their sake. The Amrin and Bereish Pirkin, the Psula, we say in the beginning of our parak that that's puzzle, Im Kom Shalol Lishmanu, if the Kamitz is taken not for their sake, Lo Karav Hamater Kimitzvaso, that's called Lo Karav Hamater Kimitzvaso, Vein Beshirayim Kares, and then in the remainder there will not be kares. Kazayis bachutzu, kazayis lamachar. Again, he has by one kazayis he has intention outside the proper place, and then a kazayis he has intention outside the proper time. Chishe beachas avodos beis machshavos. Let's say in one avodah he has two intentions. Chutz lezmanu v'chutz lemekomo. He has intention outside the proper time and outside the proper place. V'yad hashta ayri b'shtei avodos. Rashi says until now we're dealing with two separate avodos of the carbon. Shechishe beachas, that in one avodah he has intention chutz lezmanu outside the proper time. V'yachas chutz lemekomo, and then in the other outside the proper place. Here he has that intention in both, in one avoda. Well, Rabbi Yehuda the Itzrich, and this is really necessary to teach according to Rabbi Yehuda, the low tema that you shouldn't say shachish of shtein b'shtei avodos with the polag Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe you'll say Rabbi Yehuda only argues, again Rabbi Yehuda says the order makes a difference, maybe that's only by two avodos. The basar kamai sazlin, we go after the first one. Avol b'chada avoda moda, maybe Rabbi Yehuda would admit if it's all in one avoda, kamash malan, that's what the point of the Mishnah is to teach that Rabbi Yehuda argues even within one avoda. This is all explained in Meseches Zvachim in the second parak. Kazayis lamachar, kazayis bachutz, kazayis tomorrow, kazayis outside that proper place. Even though originally he does have that outside the proper time intention, but that second intention of outside the proper place takes away the kares. And Rabbi Yehuda Polag Tanakam, Rabbi Yehuda argues on the Tanakam, as we said, bein ba'avoda achas, bein v'shtei avodos, whether it's one avoda or two avodos. And the Gemara says, they had the following question, according to the one who says, this was quoted earlier, this opinion, according to the one who says, if the remainder of a karban mincha went missing, some of it went missing between the kmitza, between the taking of the fistful and the haktara, and the burning of the fistful on the mizbeach, so there's an opinion that maktir kometz alei, and that still, even though the shirayim went chaser, but still you're allowed to burn the kometz on account of those shirayim, you do burn the kometz on the mizbeach, but we've established the osan shirayim that remainder asurim ba'achil, it's forbidden to eat that remainder of the karban mincha, even though normally the remainder of the mincha is eaten by the kohanim. In this case, it is not eaten by the kohanim. So the question is as follows: Number one, does this haktara, this burning of the kometz, can it establish pigul in this situation? Let's say the person has intention outside the proper time. And number two, is this haktara sufficient in order to take away me'ila once there's a heter lakohanim? Generally there's no me'ila, but here you have a situation where you're burning the kometz, but it's not really permitted to kohanim, so is me'ila taken away? That's the question of the Gemara. Rashi explains, does the burning establish pigul? Kagon, for example, let's say he burns the kometz with the wrong intention to eat this remainder outside the proper time, so mikvi bepigul b'hachaktara kiv'haktara. On the one hand we could say that it's pigul just like any normal burning of the kometz can make pigul. Hoel over a shasmakter, since he was allowed to burn it on the mizbeach, that's the halacha. O dilmor, maybe kevan den shirayim necholim, since the shirayim, the remainder of the mincha, is not eaten in this case. It's like he's intending to eat something tomorrow, but it's something that really shouldn't be eaten anyway. Like we say later on, that his intention will not be effective. And also the question is, will it take away me'ila? Meaning, let's say he burns the kometz the proper way, in silence, without a wrong intention. Do we say, since he had permission to burn the kometz, it's a real burning of the kometz, it takes the remainder away from me'ila like a regular burning. The general halacha we say Meseches me'ila is that by karban mincha there's me'ila misha huktashu, from the time it's sanctified, but karav hakometz, once the fistful is offered, chayovin alein mishum pigol noser v'tamei, so then there is liability in terms of pigol, noser, and tamei, ve'ein me'ila b'shirayim, but at that point there is no me'ila on the remainder, because at that point in time, the remainder is now mutter to kohanim. It's like it belongs to the kohanim, so there's no me'ila. To have a shas heter l'kohanim, that's considered a time of permission for the kohanim. V'chol sheyesh lo shas heter l'kohanim ein bo me'ila. The general rule is, once something is permitted to the kohanim, it's not considered Kodshei Hashem anymore, so there's no me'ila. But parakama de me'ila, that's what we say in the first parak of me'ila, there's no liability for personal use in terms of the liability of me'ila. O dilmor maybe cave into sof ein shirayim nechol, and since at the end the shirayim is not supposed to be eaten in this case, havalu davar she'ein lo heter l'kohanim. This is something where there really is no permission for kohanim. V'lo nafki mi me'ila, and therefore it doesn't get taken out of the category of me'ila. And the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Rav Huna says, "Afilu Rav Akiva do Amar Zrika Moelas Liyotze." Even according to Rav Akiva, who says that Zrika, the throwing of the blood, is affected by a carbon that's Yotze, that leaves the proper place. Hani Mila Yotze Diise Beene Upasul Machmas Davar Acheru. That's by Yotze, where it's intact, the carbon is intact, and the psul is from something else. Avol Chisarn, but when you have a situation of Chisarn where some of it goes missing, the psula de Gufehu, where it's an intrinsic disqualification, Lo Mahani Le Haktara. So there, the Haktara is actually not going to be effective in these regards. And Rashi explains, Zafila Rabbi Akiva da Amar beparakama de Me'ila, even Rabbi Akiva who says in the first parak of Me'ila, Zrika moelis liyotze chutz lekloim, that Zrika is effective for a carbon that leaves the curtains of the Azar, lemahave kidavar sheyesh lo heter lekohanim. It is considered like something which is permitted to the Kohanim, ulemeipak midei asha Me'ilos, and therefore it is taken out of the category of Me'ila. Dizrikaso hotziyasu midei Me'ila, the throwing of the blood does take it out of the category of Me'ila, afapi she'enim mutaris ba'achil, even though it really technically cannot be eaten. Still, it's effective to take it out of the category of me'ila, even according to that opinion of Rabbi Akiva. That's by Yotze, because machmas davar acher, the psul is from something else, meaning aver Yerushalayim poslo, the airspace of Yerushalayim disqualified it, sheyotzim and akloim, that it left the curtains. But here, lo mahanya le haktara, but here the haktara is not going to be effective because it's an intrinsic disqualification of lo nafka mi me'ila, and it will not leave the category of me'ila. And the Gemara continues with an opposing view. Amar le Rava, Rava said to him, he said to Rav Huna, Adarab, on the contrary, Afilu Rabbi Eliezer, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar ein Zrika moelis liyotze, who says that Zrika is not effective if it leaves the proper area. Hani mili yotze, that's by Yotze delese bifnim, where it's not in the area, it's not inside. Avol chisarn, but when it's missing something, but the ise bifnim, but it is inside within the proper area, mahanya le haktara, then the haktara actually will be effective. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Eliezer Svirale, Rabbi Eliezer holds the psul yotze char mechisarn, that the psul of going outside the proper place is actually stricter than the disqualification when some of it goes missing. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, Rava says, Mino Aminola, from where can I prove that my position is correct? And Rashi explains, Mino Aminola, the Mahani Lu Haktara, again, Rava is arguing that the Haktara, the burning of the komets, is effective, lepigel, in terms of pigel, Vilyatzias Me'ila, and in terms of leaving the category of Me'ila, it is an effective Haktara, even in a situation where it's Chasr, where the Shirayim are Chasru. Where can we prove that this is the case? Again, that's even though the Shirayim are not eaten by the Kohanim. And Rava says, D'Tanan, we can prove it from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, "Hakometz as hamincha lechol shira b'chutz." Again, the case in our Mishnah talking about outside the proper place. If someone takes the kometz of the karban mincha with the intention to eat the remainder outside the proper place, o kazayis mishira b'chutz, or kazayis of the remainder outside of the proper place. That's what our Mishnah said. V'tani Rabbi Chia, but Rabbi Chia taught hakometz as hamincha. He added as the person takes the kometz of the mincha v'lo tani o kazayis, and he doesn't have the case of kazayis mishira b'chutz. So why did Rabbi Chia say that we shouldn't have the word kazayis in the Mishnah? My time lo tani o kazayis. What's the reason that he did not have in the Mishnah the text of o kazayis? Lav kagon shechasru shirayim. Isn't the Mishnah talking where you have a situation where the shirayim are in fact chasr? Some of it went missing. V'kamul hu akazayis, and all that remained was a kazayis of the shirayim. V'kevan devematan kli behiloch v'haktar lo masni lay. And since by the placing it in the vessel and the conveying and the burning, he wasn't able to teach it. And Rashi explains, V'tani Rabbi Chia l'masnisin, v'lo tani o kazayis. Rabbi Chia, when he taught the Mishnah, he doesn't have the word o kazayis. Lo bekometz, v'lo b'shirayim, lo bepigel, v'lo bepsol. He doesn't have it in any of the cases. Not by the kometz, not by the remainder, not by the case of pigel, which is intention outside the proper time, not by the case of psul, disqualification, which is intention outside the proper place. My time lo tani o kazayis mishirayim l'machar. Why doesn't Rabbi Chia have in the text of the Mishnah that again the person had intention to eat from the shirayim, a kazayis from the shirayim tomorrow, the next day? Lav mishum demand to katani o kazayis. Isn't the reason why Rabbi Chia learned it that way is because if you have o kazayis, mash malay the chihadar tani hanosin bekliva hamolich v'hamakter lechol davar lahakter komso kazayis mikomso lamachar. Isn't it because then it's going to sound like the Mishnah is saying again, if the person did these parts of the avoda of the korban with intention outside the proper time, meaning for tomorrow, could go in shechasru shirayim. It could be talking about a case where the shirayim, some of it went missing. V'yamdu al kazayis, and all that was left of the shirayim was a kazayis. Exactly this kind of case. V'yamar hareini nosin bekli, and the person says, I'm going to place it in the vessel. Umolich umaktir, he conveys it or burns it. Al manas lechol kazayis shel shirayim l'machar, with the intention of eating this kazayis of the remainder tomorrow. V'yafa gav de machsheves kamitza lekol amemer shekvar chasru. Now, even though in terms of the intention of the kometz, you can't say that because it already went missing. Dimkein havale mincha shechasra kodem kamitza. By the actual kamitza, you can't say that because then the mincha would have been chaser before the kamitza. Upsula be disqualified. Vesulo mikva bepigel. In a situation where the mincha was chaser before kamitza, there already it's disqualified. There's no pigel. Afilu hachi machsheves matan kli v'hilach v'aktar. But nevertheless, if that kind of intention in a case of chisaron happens after the kometz, meaning when it's placed in the vessel, when it's conveyed to the mizbeach, when it's burned on the mizbeach, hoel va'afilu chasru mutter lahaktar hakometz, since it is mutter to burn the kometz even if the shirayim are chaser after the kometz, muki lo b'shekvar chasru la'achar kamitza, so that's talking where it was chaser after kamitza, afilu hachi ein pigel, and nevertheless it is considered to be pigel. And Rashi continues, v'haida lo tani le Rabbi Chia, the reason why Rabbi Chia doesn't have the word kazayis in the Mishnah, lav mishum de lo svira lehachi, it's not that he doesn't agree, de lo poligolad de Rebbe, Rabbi Chia is not going to argue on Rebbe, the stomach de masnis and Rebbe he, the unattributed Mishnah is authored by Rebbe, ela mishum de lo motzi lo ukme lekula masnis and b'chia gavna, it's just that Rabbi Chia understands that you can't have kazayis be in the entire Mishnah, it's not going to work in all of the cases of the Mishnah, as we will see. That by matan kli and hilach and aktara, he's not going to be able to learn it, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amid Beis.